Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Perakee Podcast. Today I have with me Ben C. George of Colorado. He is an author. He's a man of many ideas. He's also a computer programmer. And last, but definitely not least of all, he is a fellow Perakee. And he's led a very interesting life. And really what I'm trying to go for, when I first started doing the Perakee Podcast, I kind of was always inspired by Art Bell and all these interesting things. I've led a very strange and unusual life, so I like to talk to strange and abstract type thinking people. But really, right now, the calling's been something's telling me, and as I thought it, all these Perakee are getting a hold of me and want to start telling their story. So this is what we're hitting hard right now. We had Stephanie the other day. We're gonna have you. I got 2-3 other people lined up the next few days, and I just want all the other Perakee to know, get a hold of me. We want to tell your stories because I have not met a boring Perakee yet. They are all very much individuals and very interesting people, and that's what I think. I think something's happening here, and everybody else kind of does too. There's a momentum, a wave, and energy building, and Ben's a big part of that. So take her away, Ben. Tell us. Start right from the beginning. Tell us your story.
Start from the beginning. All right. Well, I think there's a lot of beginnings along the journey, but where I really kind of first stumbled upon the Perakee side of things, I was in Central America. I just left the United States. I sold everything, gave everything away, and I was gone. And then I was probably maybe about 6 months into that journey, which ended up lasting about 6 years. And I found The Legend of the Perakee by Larry Brinkley, and that was, must have been 2007-ish, somewhere around there. It was pretty brand new. There was like this first wave of us that all found us via Facebook. And a lot of really good communications happened back then. We had a lot of great text interactions. We had these threads that were probably 200 replies long. I lost most of that. My Facebook account got hacked recently, and I lost all of that. They deleted all that information, which is kind of a bummer, but it is what it is. So yeah, the Perakee thing is kind of interesting. It started out as just like, what is this? Like, and then as I was traveling, I was in Trinidad and Tobago, and we went to kind of a fortune teller lady on Tobago Island. She took one look at my hands, closed up her shop, kicked me out, and like forbidden me from ever coming back. I had no idea. I was like, what? Well, why? And then later on, I would find out that the Romani have a very strong tradition of the whole werewolf idea in their ideology and in their lore, right? And yeah, so I had a few of those experiences as I traveled. There's a lot of different legends in different parts of the world. There was one time, another Simeon and I, Trent, who you should interview as well. He's got a fantastic story, and he's doing a lot of very interesting things in the world too. But we were in LA, and we were doing some business stuff, and we were at this kind of business meeting, and it was interesting. We were learning like a Chinese drinking game, and just doing shots because you're losing at a brand new game, and they're all giggling, and it's all fun and games. And then we start talking about the lions, and the legend out of China was anybody with the lions had the power to fell 100 men with one blow, essentially. Yeah. And that was kind of their legend. And so I had many of these experiences just over the years and travels, and it's one of those things where I did a lot of research from kind of a more scientific perspective of genetics, biology, evolutionary biology. Why would these things happen to, every single kind of ethnic group on the planet type idea? So yeah, I've kind of touched all the gamut of everything. I guess that's kind of the long story, a little bit long, but yeah, we could dive in anywhere along there. There's a lot of other tales as well, but that's kind of the overview.
Yeah, and I think I don't remember if I said that you're also a computer programmer.
I do.
In
Yeah.
in the introduction, I can't remember if I said that or not. It's hot out. I've had a few beer.
Hey, there you
So
go.
anywhere you want to dive in. I mean, I don't know where to start. Either your Perakee experiences, which would be like awesome, but you're also an author and have a book that's got brilliant ideas that I really resonate with. So I mean, it's your story, buddy. Wherever you want to start with.
Oh, geez. You just keep giving me all the hard decisions, huh? No. So yeah, I guess I'll just go another layer in. It became one of those things where I was really kind of interested in this parakeet thing because I had noticed, like when I was younger, it was just me and my family, and my mom kind of had a single line on her right hand, and then my stepdad ended up his lines grew together over years and years and years and years. And so I was like, well, this is really interesting. So I kind of observed this, and I observed many things just and met a lot of parakeet in my travels. Uh, and there is undeniably something to it, right? It's like, okay, well, there's certainly a genetic component, there's an environmental component, there's a biological component, and I think that, there's very much a mindset component to it as well. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I have tons of stories. Kind of what angle to take the stories is a different question.
Do you
Um,
think your resonance? Do you think your resonance that made your stepfather change? Like he was close, and then it
I, I
the
think it's
frequencies align.
I think it's kind of more of an internal reflection. So, kind of my working hypothesis on all of that for the genetic aspect of it is, in the first trimester when a baby's in the womb like this, with their hands still attached to their head, all the nervous system is forming, and I think that that's kind of an integral part from the genetic side of things. But then you also have to remember our genetics are constantly changing based upon our environment, based upon our nutrition, based upon our exercise, all of these things. Some of them, yeah, they take a lot longer to express in a different way than others do. But there's going to be, some that really adapt very rapidly. And I think one of those genetic components that adapts rapidly uh is very much tied to like intention and thought, and what sort of emotion you put into that thought process. Are you able to find balance essentially? And I think that has a lot to do with it. That's just the working hypothesis. So
Nice, nice. Yeah, that's like DNA is almost like an antenna, right? And it's not, unless it's hitting the right frequencies, I think it could be changed or manipulated or brought to its highest potential, I guess, is how you would put it.
and I think that's kind of just happening as kind of an artifact of reality of us existing, walking around, moving, eating, doing a lot of things subconsciously, but some things mindfully. And so I think we're actually experiencing part of that whole dynamic, that mechanism. And I think there's a lot to be said about actually understanding the mechanics of that and how that works and how to actually, really manipulate that and use that for the betterment of the individual and the betterment of the community, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, you got a very scientific approach to the whole thing. I've seen that. You sent me a lot of things that I've read, and I've read your book. And I'm that way too. I'm a big nerd, like sci-fi, and I've just been stuck in the bush my whole life, working in camp lives, and I just have a thirsty mind. So it's always been quantum physics and astrology and this and that, and I like a
Mhm.
more scientific based things and explanations to try and nail down this experience that I'm going through, which but the ether and the energy and the subtle forces, the immeasurable forces that seem to guide my life, there, you can't nail that down. You can't, like, it's impossible. And like, I would feel like I'm crazy. I'm really glad I started doing this, because now I'm connecting with so many other people that make me feel not crazy. Because like I feel like through everything, every book I've ever picked up, every little YouTube video I watch, this and that, sometimes it'll take a month or 2 or 3 months, and then all of a sudden I'll read one book, and then it comes and hits you all at once. It's like, I've been divinely guided for the last 3 months to have this epiphany right now. And it wouldn't have happened unless I read this, which lots of them had nothing to do with each other.
Yeah.
Completely unrelated
sure.
topics and
sure.
stuff like
Yeah.
that. But yeah, I like your approach too, because a lot of this can be considered woo-woo and this and that. I mean, I work as an underground miner. You think I talk about this stuff with the people I work with and the life that I live, right? I'm a chameleon. I got to be who I got to be over there. And then I come here, and all my friends and spiritual brothers are brothers and sisters are on the internet, right?
Yep, there's a lot of that to life. I have a lot of experience doing that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. You must be a computer programmer. You're dealing specifically with like very analytical, straight fact type people, I would imagine.
Well, yeah, but to be fair in that equation, I've done a lot for, just myself over the years. So it's one of those things where I've moved more and more. I started out my first business when I was 16 doing web design stuff. And
Okay.
then I've been kind of technical ever since. So I've had, the good fortune to be able to, spend a lot of the time just kind of, I'm the only asshole in the room that, I have to deal with, not all the other ones. So I could have all those really interesting conversations. Like, for instance, I've been building different types of trading algorithms. And, when you're able to connect kind of these disparate pieces of information, when, you're like, oh, I read that, and then it triggered this, and then it triggered that. And then, oh yeah, that actually kind of makes sense. Being able to kind of, frame that and look at it from different perspectives has been very valuable to just like my ability to understand not just the systems I'm trying to build, but the systems that I've studied throughout my life, all the quantum physics, all of the biology, all of the evolutionary stuff, like, as you mentioned.
Yeah. And I read over the stuff you gave to me today, and I don't know, like, I don't know. I want to talk about your book for sure, but like the stuff you gave to me today, I mean, I don't know if it's heavy stuff, right? And I know
Sure.
about all that and this and that. So I don't know, just for the layperson or the viewer, this or that, how deep you want to go that. But do you want to talk about your book
Sure, we can talk about
and
the book.
your concept and ideas behind the book, and what it's about, so people would take interest in it?
Sure. So the book actually was born from kind of like a scientific study that I did for a number of years. And I came up with this, kind of take on physics, what I call the theory of information. And kind of the idea is that, if you were to go down below the subatomic, you could kind of quantify everything as kind of bits of information. That would kind of be the easiest way to explain it. And then that kind of actually gave birth to this philosophical idea. And I don't really consider myself a philosopher or anything like that, but all of a sudden I wrote a philosophy book. And the idea is it's called No Absolutes, a framework for life. And more so than anything, it's really just about, finding balance and having balance as a focus to life, because that's how we're able to, resolve seemingly paradoxical situations and find that middle path, find that balanced road. And so it's just kind of a little philosophical, I don't know, introduction. It was meant to be one of 3 books, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing I remember from reading it. Like, it's really like, you can find a lot of correlations with Legend of Perakee. If you study Hermetic principles, Buddhism, the middle road, that comes up all the time. You want to? I was just talking with Stephanie the other day. Jung, right? Carl
Mhm.
Jung, the dark side, the dark path, doing shadow work and stuff. That it's
Mhm.
the denying that part of our lives and stuff like that. Like we're still very primal, not that far away from our primal roots, and we're accelerating very fast, right?
Oh yeah.
Into it's getting really bright out. So finding that balance, and I would think it's pretty easy to see that, like, especially the Catholic Church and everything, riding off people's guilt and stuff like that, and have them guilty of their dark sides or wants and needs and stuff like that, and make people.
It's been an effective business model.
It's a super effective business model. I've always said, I've always had an idea. I like you have some like economic model ideas and stuff like that. That would be good to get
Mhm.
into. But like my idea, the inspiration is the Catholic Church or any church. I believe they ask that you give 10% of your earnings to the church, right?
Right.
Well,
The tithing. Yeah.
I got this idea, and I think capitalism could work good if it wasn't for the corruption and everything, absolute corruption. But the 10% model, if
Mhm.
every corporation actually paid 10% of what they did, and every individual only had to pay 10%, and every little country store paid 10% of their earnings, I think we would have way more than enough to help everybody
Mhm.
and build the roads and the schools and everything like that. If it wasn't for
Sure.
corruption, and if it wasn't for all these huge corporations probably giving way less than 10% like they do, we would have more than enough for everyone to go around.
Oh, sure. And then you throw in a few, moral and ethical type things like, all the money we spend on war, for instance.
Yes.
All of these other things. And I think what we're actually going to see is over the next, especially few years in the short term, but definitely more in the long term, is the rise of parallel economies. And
So
so these parallel economies are just going to be, we've kind of already seen the beginnings of it, right? It's kind of like your Bitcoin and your cryptocurrency type stuff, but not really yet, because it's so very much intertwined with speculation and is very volatile. However, when these things really kind of move out, you're just going to see, little groups of people kind of be like, okay, we've had enough of the crazy. We're going to go off and actually try our own thing, because now we are enabled by all of the tools of the world, and we are enabled to all of a sudden, attempt these different ideas. And it's not about like, like a hippie commune in the mountains or anything like that, but it becomes, hey, a group of people who are completely technically intertwined with the rest of the world, and we just kind of have our own little set of rules, like where we value community. There'll be all sorts of different incarnations of this, but I think we're going to see a large rise in that in the coming years.
so you think I love the idea of it. It's like a Wild West kind of manifest destiny, right? Uh, Rendering
Similar.
your own reality as much as you can. Joint and I really like joint manifesting, right? I especially have had a lot of ideas and been talking with people about Perakee are very powerful manifestors and getting people together, working together.
Mhm.
I think we can accomplish great things. But you believe that this could be done with us, with like-minded people still being all over the planet and still being integrated into society, because I'm very much a woodsman. I've
No,
lived
I hear
way out
you.
in the woods, and I'm very secluded. I'm always in very remote places in the wilderness to
Mhm.
work for half my life. And then when I come home, I that's exactly where I go to. I go to the beach, I go to the mountain, I go to the river with my dogs. I don't know if you've noticed this. I'm extremely sensitive to electromagnetic fields, frequencies, this, that, everything.
Oh yeah.
You're probably the same as a parakeet. And it didn't, once I started realizing this about myself, it's like, wow, how do I feel when I'm a mile under the ground where there's
Mhm.
no cell, no this, no, I feel fantastic. And when I come back to town, there's a certain amount of anxiety. And then people I've learned, right? You go to Vancouver or a big metropolis, I've learned to put my energetic shield up and turn that sort of stuff on. But like just the frequencies of, I'm sure it's the cell and the 5G and the Wi-Fi and everything like that.
Mhm.
I have to go to the beach every day for a couple hours just to ground that out. I have to exercise, run 5K, lift weights, swim every day, move, move, move. And I feel if I sit still, it feels like my skin almost crawls in this electric environment we're in. I don't know if you feel the
Well,
same about that.
The interesting thing is it doesn't even have to be influenced by the external environment. Like once you get your body to like a certain potential, you basically, kind of similar, everybody kind of has the experience where you eat a lot and your stomach gets bigger and then you can eat more.
Yeah.
So a similar, as above, so below from kind of like a hermetic philosophy perspective, in as internal, so external. And so these things are just kind of a mimicry, of the systems that are all around us. And one of those mimicries is we have this full electromagnetic system internal to the human body. And you start to really tune those things up. You start to do the lifting of the weights, you start to do the exercise, all of a sudden you create basically like an increased charge potential. And
Right.
that energy doesn't have any way to dissipate, doesn't have any place to go, because now instead of, being out and about for 8-10 hours a day, now you're kind of just like locked up in town in some essence. And so it can be entirely internally driven too, you know.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense because at work I do 12-hour shifts. I'm like a
Sure.
psycho. I get up at 2 in the morning to go work out before I do my 12-hour shift. So then that's a hard transition when I come home. I still get up at 5, 6 in the morning to go to the gym and do all that, but I'm still not as fulfilled as I am all day at the mine, where it's
Mm-hmm.
12 hours of work plus 2 hours of working out, stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, sitting still or looking at my phone or just sitting around at all. I'm like, I gotta move, I gotta do something, I gotta read something, I gotta learn something, I gotta go on an adventure or ground out in nature. Like yeah,
For sure. Yeah. I'm just
not even an
I'm the same
option.
way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all right. So do you have any cool parakeet stories and synchronicities and stuff like that, or
Oh,
just
sure.
crazy life experiences that you believe have to do with your with the
Hmm.
lines on your hands?
Well, I definitely in the past few years have met quite a few parakeet and travels. You know, all of a sudden I'll be in conversation with somebody for 30, 45 minutes and go, just a really random question, but can I see your palms? And they're like, huh, what? And most people are pretty unaware still, but I have met a couple people who are like, oh yeah, I've heard about that type idea. Um, but yeah, crazy stories. I don't know. It depends on what sort of vein of crazy we want to get into. Uh, because there's a lot of crazy stories, and then there's the crazy, crazy stories.
I want
So
the
I don't
crazy,
know.
crazy brother. I want the crazy. I want them all.
Oh man. Well, I don't know. Some of them are long, but no, there's definitely something to the potentiality of what all of that means together. Whether that's you take it from the aspect of the physics, like we were talking about before, or you take it from more of a metaphysical type angle, um, or genetics from a scientific angle, things like that. There's definitely something to be said about what's happening. And I think that's an important kind of field of study. And that's kind of what I've been doing for the past, well, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. Um, yeah, I don't know how crazy I want to share the stories right now because there's
Yeah,
some
yeah,
crazy
that's fine.
stories, but yeah, and I'm having a hard time thinking of any. So if you have any ideas on kind of like a genre,
Synchronicities or anything. Though that's what hits me all the time.
okay.
For like finding books and finding information, I get but no pressure.
Oh no, well, I mean, that's kind of just been, this, I've been doing this thing for so long that some of these things kind of, I guess, integrated into life is the way to say it. Like, you say the synchronicities, I've kind of turned that almost into a skill at some level. Like for instance, when I'm programming and I can't figure something out, I'll just read about it, I'll just put it back into my head and go to sleep. And I wake up in the morning and I have it figured out. So, it's like one of those synchronicities, but it's also because I've learned how to program my brain in a certain way. And it very much comes down to intent and motion and thought and actions and sound, and it's a multitude of factors. But
Well, it sounds like you got a good connection with your subconscious, and I really wondered if that's all what psychic ability, parakeet or not, and everything really is a really maybe more open channel with that or sensitivity to the subconscious, because I've always been really good at manifesting. I always know when
Mhm.
something's gonna happen, like that happen, those kind of synchronicities and stuff like that. I'll be like, oh, the power's gonna go out today, you know, we're driving into work or this or that. And people like it's reckoning, people know, like they're like, how the fuck did you know that all the time, right? Like, so that's what, and one that's really hit me a lot in the last year or so is like me learning a concept. And I don't know if it's like 100th monkey effect. I don't know if you're familiar
Yeah,
with that.
I'm aware of
Just
that. Yeah.
if you're aware of it, I'm aware of it. But just for the viewers, it's like um recently they've been doing studies and stuff, and like this one monkey will learn to wash its fruit in the ocean and before it eats it and this and that, and then they start noticing a few other monkeys start doing it around them, but no other monkeys are doing this in the world. And then by about the 100th monkey, now monkeys all over the world on other islands start doing the same behaviors with no way they could have talked
Communicated.
to each other or anything like that.
Mhm.
It's a really fascinating idea that kind of, I don't know, proves or shows consciousness, like a universal consciousness that we're all connected to. And that's what I find. Like I will start learning about a new concept or idea, and I listen to
Mhm.
dozens and dozens of podcasts at work, all 12 hours a day at work. And you know, I haven't heard any of this on any of these abstract out there type spiritual conspiracy type thinking people are pretty cutting edge, you know, I like to think. I listen to
Mhm.
some good intellectual people. And all of a sudden I'll read a book on something, and then, you know, I haven't mentioned it to anybody or this, that, and then all of a sudden, wow, it shows up here. And then it shows up there. And then
Mhm.
within 2 months, it's on something as mainstream as Joe Rogan.
Mhm.
Joe Rogan, have you heard of this? And I'm like, what the hell, man? I just, so it's like, is it the 100th monkey? And I'm just a little more sensitive. So I picked up the frequency
So
faster. I'm pursuing that sort of thing, and other people aren't. So that's why I picked it up faster. But
well,
something's happening.
I think there's kind of an aspect to it in that way too. But have you ever heard of the Global Consciousness Project by Princeton University?
Is that the one with the random
Number generators
generators
all over the
all over
world.
the?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so they would go into, they would start spitting out patterns, before and after major world events.
like nine
And
eleven and stuff, right?
9/11, the tsunami in Sumatra, things like that.
Can
Uh,
can you can we just stop like
yeah.
just one sec, because I know what this is and you know what this is, but we got listeners that won't. So can you explain what the project is before we dive into it?
Yeah, so the idea is that Princeton just put these little computers that were just spitting out random numbers and letters all over the world, and they would monitor them to see if there was any sort of patterns that kind of emerged. And it was kind of just an open-ended experiment. And then what started to happen is they noticed that there would be patterns that would actually develop in the data, and then they started correlating these patterns with world events, and they found that the synchronicity between these things was just spot on. And the larger the world event, the actual more patterns that would be generated in the random number generators across the world.
Well, and the fascinating thing that I found from reading about it was that they started ramping up before the event happens.
Yeah, before,
Like
right.
9/11, before, like say that happens at 9 in the morning, at 4 in the morning, these things start kicking off.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing that's always brought it to me, is that it is the in tune. Is it just that you're awareness or you're manifesting? Because
So there's
that's
gonna
for what in my life, that's what it's come down to. I used to observe my grandfather at the general store. He owned a general store outside of Vancouver for 50 years. And that man could watch a car pull up and he could tell you what they're going to buy when they come in. Now, is he psychic? Or is he just sat there for 50 years and he's just very deductive reasoning, this type of car, this ethnicity of person, this, are they getting a fishing
right.
lure? Are they coming here to buy a pack of smokes? Are they coming, is it, yeah, it was amazing.
In my perspective, it's kind of a little bit of both,
Yeah.
right? Oh, so and I'll kind of articulate that by saying, we're transceivers as human beings. We're both transmitting and we're both receiving all sorts of different sensory input and all of these things. And I think the way that kind of reality unfolds is the way I see it is the everything that's in motion, all of those transceivers moving around, all those atoms even are creating kind of this wave that reflects back to us. And that reflection back is kind of the most probable events that could happen based on all of that data. And the unfolding of reality is whatever probability kind of wins out. And that's kind of, everybody's free choice goes into that next unfolding of events. And I think that's kind of, that's how I see this whole thing from a mechanistic perspective kind of working.
Well, I completely dig what you're saying. And I guess the way I'd like to see it in a miner's way, I guess the way I say that would be more for the lay people. The way I see it is we're all jointly manifesting, right? It's kind of like a group
Sure.
choose your own adventure novel, right? And I think
Oh,
that's why traditionally religions are always trying to control the narrative, right?
mhm.
Of consciousness. Like I believe consciousness is the pure gold on this planet. Hence the words pay attention. You're
Mhm.
paying your attention to something. And I think we are all jointly manifesting this reality. And up until the internet started popping off in the late 90s, it was really easy to control everybody with 5 TV channels, in the
Oh,
United
for
States
sure.
when
Oh
we grew
yeah.
up. And you're controlling the consciousness, you're controlling the story that's being fed to everybody. And I think the internet blew up. And now look at the world.
Mhm.
It's a wide open cornucopia of ideas and this and that. And I think they're freaking out. And there's even theories now. Shout out to Tinfoil Hat, Sam Tripoli. I heard it on there, like that the internet is dead. I don't know if you're a computer programmer, that before when you used to type something into a search engine, 3 million things, and
Right.
then
Yeah.
no, you're only going to get this now.
Oh yeah. For the most
We're
part.
going to allow
Yeah.
what we're going to allow you to have, and I think that's a huge thing. I study the Hermetic principles. I'm a member of a mystery school, and I'm really coming into huge understanding of my own understanding of reality and the way it works and stuff from ancient and mystical knowledge and stuff. And it makes,
Mhm.
oh, okay, this makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
All my mushroom trips and stuff when I was a teenager now are coming together.
Oh yeah, that's what that was. All right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's like now I can see why they try so hard to grab our attention and our focus and everything. Look at the world today. Everybody's stuck like this, right?
Mhm.
And it's killing creativity. It's killing imagination. It's
Oh yeah.
and creating divisiveness on every angle that you can imagine. Black, white, male, female, trans, gay, Democrat, Republican,
Mhm.
liberal and conservative, what we have up here, so that we have no focus, so that we have no direction, that we
Well, so that we don't look at where the real problem is.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It's just an extension of the old Roman idea of bread and circus.
Well, do you think that's just so it's a complete distraction so people don't look within?
Well, that's part of it. There's it's just like all these things. I think, there's no like single cut and dry answer. There's a multitude of perspectives. Some people will do things for a certain reason, while others will do the same exact thing for an entirely different reason. Depending on what their end goals are, what their motivations are, what their ideologies are, etc. So I think, it's going to be, there's always going to be some perspective to be had in questions like that.
Yeah, it's tough. Like I really dive deep into myself with meditation and stuff like that, and know these principles and philosophies and try to. But it's patience is the big the biggest one. It's like, come on, man, I'm doing all this stuff. How come I'm not? How come it's not going easy for me yet? But I guess that's the whole experience of consciousness or being a part of consciousness, is trials and tribulations and stuff like that. But I just find the world so strange. Like I feel so disconnected in my regular day to day life,
Mhm.
I'm very connected with nature and with myself. And then, but like here, it's just such an absurdity that, not so close with neighbors and this and that and everything like that. But I find such close connections with people. It's such a wonderful thing all over the world
Right.
that are more on the same wavelength. And it's a powerful, great tool, the internet.
Oh yeah. Well, I think, part of what we're seeing kind of just roll out in the world is the internet came along and it opened up like real mass communication worldwide. And that became a reality. And I think what we're actually seeing just kind of unfold is the results of that. Because now we're able to have this conversation, 1,200 miles apart from one another. And we can compare notes, we can compare research, we can compare all these things. And this is happening by the millions on a daily basis. Eventually, enough people are talking where now they're asking the real questions. Well, why are we doing it this way? Why would we do it this way? How can you say that when you do this type, and so I think we live in some very fascinating times. And I think everything's in for quite a large shift here pretty shortly.
Yeah, there's a huge shift coming, and that's the thing. I can feel it. It seems like a lot of other people can, and I really am feel compelled to, especially be getting the Perakee together and
Mhm.
talking and stuff like that. Because as I said before, I believe we're powerful manifestors. I believe we have a destiny. I mean, I don't know what you call that. I think it's the imposter syndrome or this that. I've had just such weird stuff my whole life since I was a child. People
Mhm.
telling me I was an alien when I was 14 to come here to save the world. I was a Pleiadian, and then finding out I'm a parakeet, and then time and time again, it's like, yeah, you're here for a major purpose and this and that, and it's like, well, point me in that direction. Where? What am I supposed to do? You know what I mean? Like, and I'm doing a lot of self work. I'm not a perfect person by any means. I still like my doobies and beer and stuff like that. I don't think that makes you a bad person or anything.
Yeah.
Um, but like, yeah, especially in the last year, and I don't know if I attributed it just to turning 40 years old, but like health and fitness and joining esoteric mystery school and stuff like that, and just like really, really focused on myself. I guess I spent so many years being resentful of being alone doing the camp work,
Hmm.
because you're alone under the ground working by yourself
Oh
all day,
yeah.
and then you get
Oh
out
yeah.
and you're in a little ATCO trailer alone, and you spend 2 weeks basically. You talk to people when you eat lunch or when you eat breakfast and when you eat dinner and stuff like that. And I resented it the whole time. Now I thrive in it. Now
Sure.
I thrive in all my time, my alone time for learning and learning and working on myself.
Hmm.
It's been a healthy thing.
Oh, for sure. I can only imagine. You know, the way I've kind of seen it in my life, and so I suspect it would kind of roll out similar for you, is, you've already described kind of the process. You'll read something over here, and then all of a sudden, a couple of weeks later, you'll notice something over here, and then you're talking to this person, and then something actually happens. And
Yeah.
so it's one of those things where, you know, you're already prepared for it because you already understand how the process works. It's just kind of more attenuating to that process. At least it was in my experience. It has been.
Yeah, the seek and you shall find, and it may be just your own subconscious rolling it all out for you, because you know what I mean. It's taking in so much more than you can understand. Your subconscious connection
Yeah.
connection to the
Yeah.
consciousness.
It got your memo that said, oh, you want that information. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Feed them that stuff.
yeah. Trying to be a good person, trying to help the world, this and that, and then it all just starts falling into place for you to do that. And that's the fascinating thing. Like growing up, loving conspiracies and this and that, I always was like freaking Freemasons and this and that, secret societies and that. And then now that I'm more come to an understanding, I'm not a Freemason. But I know I'm studying the same things that they do, and hermetic principles and laws of reality and nature and the ways in it, and Buddhism and Hinduism and every religion you can imagine. I'm diving into every single one and the correlations. And it's like, wow, okay, well, I think these people that are in these societies are it's not that they're in them and that's why they're in those positions. They're in them because they're on a path of self knowledge and to be a good person and to live a life of service.
Mhm.
And so then naturally you're gonna rise to the top.
Mhm.
I would think. Now, don't get me wrong. It's a great power. It's a great when you start understanding how to influence your reality and this and that. You could completely take advantage of that, and you could completely take advantage of other people and stuff like that. So I'm just like everything else. There's going to be good and bad, or dark and light, or whatever way you think that is
Mhm.
in any given situation.
Ah, well said. And I think, there's a lot to be said about, not just viewing it as black and white or good and evil or things like that, but actually, again, finding that middle road. I think that's kind of one of the key aspects to, what a Perakee is too. If you think about the line, it's kind of a balanced system. It's something
Right.
that, it's whereas normally, for the vast majority of people, it's kind of a split thing. All of a sudden, this thing is put together. And I'm pretty sure you have this experience in your life, but you've always kind of felt, you felt your emotions and you've thought your emotions, and they kind of have all kind of, been jumbled together, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Explosive temper as a child.
Hmm.
Very, very, very strong feeling. And I've just learned with maturity to use that to my advantage,
Hmm.
that I'm extremely sensitive and stuff like that. Like to be able to run, you know what I mean? To run for
That's
an
true.
hour straight and stuff like that. I'll just set up 10 highly emotional songs that are really meaningful to me.
It's a
And
way to
I'll
do
really
it.
mess with
Yeah.
myself. I'll use ones that bring me way up, and I'll bring ones that bring me way down.
Hmm.
And you know what I mean? One will charge you up, and then one will make you sad as hell. So you're running to fight, and it can, yeah, I can. I've learned to manipulate my own emotions that are intrinsically tied to my thoughts
Right.
that manifest my reality, right? So I don't
Hmm.
know if that just comes from experience or maturity or whatever, but it definitely works.
I think it comes from trial and error in my experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things, I was a wild youth, and then eventually it got to the point where it's like, well, I should probably, at least think about a few of these things. You probably, and then, that was the end of it. All of a sudden, I've been down the path for quite a few years now where, yeah, I just, I started realizing that there was a lot more to be said about being a good person, even though good's relative, right? Like what's good for me might not be good for you. But at the
Exactly.
same time, there are some things that tend to transcend that, like, and they transcend that because everybody has some similar ideas about life. They want their friends and their family to thrive, they want their children to have opportunity, they want a place to live, they want food, they want, they don't people don't really care about, capitalism. People don't really care about, making money or businesses or nations or things like that. Yeah, there's a small group of people do, and that kind of drives the overall infrastructure of society. But as I traveled, one of my takeaways was just that people are people, and they really just want those basic people things. Beyond that, that's just it's a different conversation.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. We just want to raise our kids and live a peaceful life. And yeah, unfortunately, I live in a great place to do that. And not a lot of people do. And you got to have gratitude for that
For
every
sure.
day. I mean, that's one thing that started making a huge different part of my life is having gratitude every day. What have you ever had any like I really like the strange experiences, the
Strange
paranormal stuff,
experience.
and I've
Okay.
had many of those myself. Like I can remember as young as like 4 and 5 years old, a mantis figure coming through my wall and then me just blacking out multiple times when I was a
Hmm.
kid. And there was lots of UFOs in and around our small town area and stuff like that. Have you ever had any experiences like that? Anything paranormal
Well,
like that?
I've had some weird experiences. I died in a dream once. That one was really interesting. And instead of everything going black, it went all white. And I woke up in kind of like a sleep paralysis. Like my eyes were open, but all I could see was just that white. And I couldn't move for probably like 5 to 10 minutes. So yeah, that one was kind of interesting. Yeah, I've had a lot of like psychedelic experiences along the way. A lot of people talk about talking to entities and things like that. And I've just never actually had those experiences personally.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I've seen some pretty wild stuff in the mountains and in my travels. And I've hooked some fish in the ocean that I wasn't able to pull out and have no idea what they could have possibly been because I sat on it for like 8 hours. So yeah, there's some paranormal in there somewhere, but not, I never really had too many of those experiences with like the UFOs or anything like that. But I did have some
Yeah.
very interesting physical ones. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I've just always wondered that. I guess I should get more of a questionnaire now that I'm starting to hit off on the Cherokee people. Have you seen a Sasquatch? Earth,
Uh-huh.
flat or round?
I I see a
You
Sasquatch every day, brother.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, have you seen my first few videos there?
Yeah, I saw you.
My beard's
You had
down to
quite the
here
beard.
with long hair. Yeah, I
Yeah.
just trimmed her up. So another thing I'm really interested in is like in your, so you did when you were in doing your South American travels, you were
Mhm.
aware of the Perakee story.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
did you meet any simians double simians down there, any Perakee, and did you learn anything or hear anything about the legend or the story?
Um, I never like hooked up with anybody in person down there that actually knew the Perakee story. I knew people who knew like local legends, like some Mayans and the Incans have different legends for the simian lion. Um, but I never met any. It was like really early. I think it must have just been a year or two after Larry published it originally, is when I found it. So.
Do you recall any of the South American lore or legend about the simians?
So a lot of it's tied to like kings and rulers type stuff. There was in the Incan stuff, they were very much the sun worshippers, and there's some really interesting correlations between their type of sun worship and like Egyptian sun worship. Um, yeah, I don't know how you kind of view like anthropology or archaeology on the world. But my personal takeaway from all of the travels and research is that there is a protoculture. I guess you could call it Atlantis, because Plato called it that. But that protoculture had already touched every single corner of this globe. And then there was a cataclysm that happened, and that kind of the remnants of that culture were what founded what we describe as our ancient cultures. And I
Yeah,
kind
they
of
just
think,
had the
yeah,
great ancient apocalypse there on Netflix, and then
right, yeah,
Randall Carlson, and then yeah, that we there was a civilization, for people don't know, there was a higher civilization like Atlantis, and there was some sort of cataclysm that took it out. Or did they just rise to a higher ascension, another dimension, and leave us behind?
well, Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson, they kind of posit that it's a cataclysm born by a comet. I actually think it's cataclysm that's really much attached to our sun. And I think, like when you look at like the Milokovich cycles and things like that, we have some evidence from ice cores and geologic drilling that, there's a pretty cyclical pattern for massive destruction or destructive events on this planet. And if you think about from like a really grand sense of, how something would be so consistent, is something consistent from space, which is huge, where some debris might impact us, or would it be more consistent from the giant fireball in the sky that impacts every other aspect of our life? And that's
Right.
kind of how I view that equation.
Yeah, there could have been many ways they've been knocked down, or maybe warded themselves, or even just the sun being in different stages that we're not aware of, that frequency wise and energy wise could have, like you say, like when they say that some people ascend in the Bible, 144,000 or this or that, it could have just been one of those cycles where the most of the people left, and the rest were left down here, and we're the descendants, we're the bastard children, which seems to be in a lot of the stories, actually, that we
Isn't
were
that
cast
interesting?
down and
Isn't that
knocked down.
interesting? Right? You got all the Greek stuff, you got the Nephilim, you got all of those things. Everybody's a
Yeah,
bastard. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we're the fallen. We're the bastards. We're the abominations of the universe, not never to be created. um, you also have your ideas for like kind of a new economic system, and you were talking about like the people developing as different nodes and this and that as a thing. Like that's kind of all how Bitcoin works and stuff like that. Like I'm not huge on Bitcoin.
A little bit, yeah. So there's definitely a decentralized component to it, which I would call that. But if you think about it from kind of like a global perspective, well, yeah, you're definitely going to need, say, people who have an abundance of copper over here, and then people who have an abundance of cows over here. And you need some sort of mechanism for them to barter. That's kind of eventually what gave rise to capitalism, right? Is the settlement of those debts. So when you decentralize that system, which is kind of what Bitcoin did from just a purely economics perspective, but I think if you did that from kind of like a communal or societal perspective, now you can create the right kind of fundamental parts for these types of parallel economies to work out. Like for instance, I don't know about you, but I think for-profit medicine and for-profit, news and for-profit, these other pillars of society, I think, they're inherently detrimental to what we actually want from society as individuals.
It's not beneficial to the whole. I mean, that's for
Right.
sure. Get the money out of politics. Um, that would make everything more. I think capitalism would work just fine if it wasn't for the corruption, probably, right? I've always
I
come from like
Yeah.
a paid by the foot, paid by what you do. Uh, Vancouver Island, British Columbia is a very resource based economy,
Mhm.
mining, logging, fishing. Most people are paid by what they get done. And I'll tell you what, it's a bunch of ass kickers up here compared to, you know what I mean? We're countryside people, we're rural folks.
Mhm.
And compared to most people I know, we're probably like what your grandfathers were like, right? Like we know how to work hard and put in days. I
Oh yeah,
think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing that keeps people
it's a great
motivated.
thing. Yeah.
But the corruption and capitalism and stuff like that, and like it's one thing I ponder all the time. Like I'm more, I don't want to give up on the world. I have children in it. I want to fight to
Mhm.
make it a better place. But I know where the good way and the proper way is to live in the woods where you don't need all this bullshit and you don't need to have the highest end stuff. But then also these computers and everything are really great. Like can we have an integrated Star Trek like society that's still can we trade globally? Does that make any sense? Like one thing that happens here
Sure.
that boggles my mind is raw logs leave Vancouver Island. We used to have sawmills everywhere. And
Mhm.
now, nope, they shut all that down and they ship raw logs over to Asia.
Mhm.
They cut them into 2x4s and then they send them back here. And then so like it's insanity. It's insanity. And it costs so much, of their CO2 greenhouse gases and all this stuff to deal with. It makes no sense. And it's taking advantage of people in third world
Yep.
nations that aren't getting paid union rates like people do here in British Columbia. That's exactly where they did it. But there was 20 sawmills in the town that I grew up in, and now there's
Mhm.
one or two. That's it.
Yeah, and you already touched on what that is. Yes, it's capitalism, but it's capitalism driven with the gasoline of corruption,
Yeah.
right? And so when you have that, and you already touched on the other kind of what I think is part of the solution for that, which is you have something you set up a meritocratic system where the people get rewarded for the way that they operate, their work ethic, the amount of labor that they can actually turn out, how they perform in their task, right? And you get exactly like you said, you get a whole bunch of ass kickers because instead of capitalism coming in and shitting on that, now you have that as very much a point of pride of the local community, right? Because everybody looks around and they're like, that guy's an ass kicker, that guy's an ass kicker, man, I want to be an ass kicker. And it's kind of the rising tide raises all ships philosophy embodied in communal relations, if you will.
Yeah, it's a conundrum. Like it's where I'm torn because I am like a country person. Like you, if you look at me to see me going straight, look at that redneck and his jacked up truck and his this and that, and he works in his mine. but I'm totally a hippie too. Vancouver Island's a very strange place. They're resource-based hippies, right?
Hmm.
Everybody's very conscious, electric cars, jogging every day, this and that. But you don't kid yourself. Everything here comes from the ground or comes from the trees and stuff, right?
Hmm.
And it's fine, like you say, finding the balance between all of that. I mean, in my life, when I think about more and more, what do you need? Like, what do you really need? Do you need food? You need shelter? You need connection, community, love, those things. We don't need to have the new iPhone
iPhone. Mhm.
26. We don't need all that bullshit.
Yep.
Can we live in community? You know what I mean? More, I don't know how to do it. I've always lived out in rural areas, and I cannot stand cities. But I mean, this is the where 90% of people live now.
Oh yeah, for
How
sure.
can we start doing this in a harmonious way? It's just so impractical. Everything in the city has to be brought in from
Mm.
these rural
Oh yeah.
places, which is causing the major stress on this planet.
Yep.
And global trading, you know what I mean? Like most countries, we could do all of this ourselves in our own country, but these cheap bastard corporations don't want to pay. I would
Exactly.
just like to see everybody brought up to a global standard, I guess, in
Well,
every country for the same jobs, and then there would be no advantage to them shipping stuff all over the damn place, and just be fair to everybody.
right,
How do
which
we
is an
accomplish this?
right, which is a nice idea, but then if you look at like how to actually implement that, well, the people who actually pull all the strings in order for something like that to happen are already the people who are getting rewarded for the system that already exists. So they're less likely to go off and, vote themselves out of power, to remove themselves from, all of that, all of the earning potential. So this kind of harkens back to what we were talking about, that I think we're going to see the rise in parallel economies. We're going to, Bitcoin's kind of like that already, but it's just strictly digital. What I think is going to happen, I think you're going to see, communities and, small towns and things like this kind of group together, and there be kind of like a meta infrastructure for that, which will just basically be like a settlement layer. And I think if you did it right, like if I were to have like my wish on it, I think you make that company, that entity, a nonprofit type idea. And when it's a nonprofit type idea, you still nonprofits still reward their employees meritocratically. They just, it's not about shareholders, and it's not about dividends, and it's not about, the stock price and things like that. And so we kind of have some of the infrastructure already, within the legal concept of what we, operate as in this, in at least like most of the Western world. So I think there's pathways to change the system from within the system, and I think we're going to see a rise of that.
And do you have any ideas? Like, how do you propose we do that? Like, are you talking like
Sure.
some sort of like bartering, like
Well,
an
no,
app
so
to barter with people with, or
yeah, so it's really just, it would just be hammer simple, because uh, there are phones and there are technology, and while I think we would agree not everybody needs the iPhone 26 and all of these things, but at the same time, us being able to have this conversation is very fruitful in terms of the growth of ideas and in the marketplace and things like that. So I think, yeah, you integrate the phones. Like if you go to anywhere in Central South America these days, everybody just sends money with their phone. They just text it to each other.
right?
Like the United States, Canada, and places like that really were kind of slow to adopt these type systems. But this is pretty already integral to, how kind of people live their life. And so instead of having the larger ideas, instead of having like the Amazons and, those sorts of conglomerates, the people would essentially be in a giant co-op, and that co-op's not necessarily a nonprofit. The co-op's just there to exist to facilitate, types of trade between these different types of communities and societies. I think
So
that's a way to do it.
so then this just sets off an idea in my mind. Like, and you're the best person to ask. Then they try to push me. I'm a paranoid person. Like that idea in the first place, Bitcoin and this and that, like them being able to program the money and with the you use your carbon footprint and you use
Mhm.
too much gas this week, you're not going to be able to get a cheeseburger, and there's
Well,
lots of
those are
paranoid
different
but
information.
valid
Yeah,
concerns.
Sure. Oh,
That's what
for sure.
concerns me about it. And but other idea that it sparks in me is like if you want to get the corruption out of politics and out of any decision making, we'll just remove the politicians. If we could have a network where we could just vote in real time. We could just
Right.
vote in real time. And if
So
they're
that,
trying to sell me that my medical records and all my banking, as you said, all my banking is done off my phone. So if it's safe enough to do all my banking and have all my medical records, well, then why can't we implement a system that we don't even need a prime minister or a president or a Congress or a
sure.
parliament, and we can just all vote in real time on how the policies and the way we're going to run our countries or
Right.
run our world.
And so that's kind of a part of my Terry Lieber project idea is a one person, one vote system.
Yeah.
And I think, the nuance to that is you don't need 300,000 people around the world voting on a very regional thing. Like, are we going to, put in another watershed up here? Right. So the only nuance to that one person, one vote is that things that impacted a group of people, those would be the people who vote on it, because those are the people who have a vested interest in it. Right.
So more locally driven systems, and then you would, yeah, it's all like where are you going to draw the imaginary lines that they've already drawn? But yeah, a locally done thing, that totally makes sense to me. But then comes into play like populations and
Sure.
money and this and that, and like who's gonna how are you going to pay for these things? If you start breaking everything into little individual things, it's kind of the whole thing with democracy and all the idea, whatever, is that like everybody in the world is helping, or in a nation is helping people, even that in these small communities, that they can have electricity and these internet and these sorts of things, because this group of 50 people would never normally be able to afford a road or electricity or combine
Right.
together. So it's like complex as hell.
Oh, it's super complex. And that's kind of like a top down system, right? That's kind of like it pushes from the top and moves into the little tributaries as it goes down the river type idea. The system that I'm describing is from the bottom up. Because now if you have those very strong communities where everything, is very much transparent and on the up and up, and there's good communication. It's not like some crazy hippie commune or anything like that, but it's actually a digitally connected global trading entity at some level. And all of that stuff can be really handled, with automation, really, not even artificial intelligence, but just automation itself. And so there's a lot of ways to actually structure this where you solve the vast majority of the problems that we have at scale in society, and you actually turn them into a lot of benefits. And I think it's from that bottom up kind of perspective of making a strong foundation before you put a house on it type idea.
So you're talking about like individual, possibly communities, or just like-minded thinking people then working together
Mhm.
and like just doing business with each other. Like, we
Right.
know you guys are growing good hemp, and we know you guys are doing good organic beer, and you guys got next level beets and carrots growing over here. So
Yep.
that's who we're gonna is that what you're kind of talking about? Because that's almost like ESG, right? Like that's kind of almost what the
Well,
bad guys are doing.
right. So I think, it's really interesting if you kind of look at what you would deem good guys and bad guys throughout antiquity. It's always, they're doing very similar things. There's just one or two of those little nuances that are kind of flipped, right? Like,
Yeah,
well, why would you put it that way? That kind of changes the entire flow of the system type idea. And
right.
and so I think we see a lot of, you'll see a lot of similarities to different types of systems. But when you have something like an ESG, that's who's actually making the decisions on how that's implemented, and
That's my concern.
who gets paid from it, right?
Yeah,
And when you answer those questions, the idea looks a little less inviting. And so the idea here is that where those kind of pillars would be in that whole setup of infrastructure, those people aren't getting paid by any sort of transactional volume. It's nothing like that. It's just kind of, it would be a network that would almost essentially be self-sustaining because it would just run on computer power. And so that network would be kind of like a settlement layer between communities. And it can be something as very similar to actually having some sort of defined arbitrary digital currency like a dollar or a Bitcoin. Or it can be something like, hey, I got 4 goats and you got 12 chickens. Let's make a deal.
Right. So, but then your idea is to rely on AI to make that fair and infallible with
You don't
people.
need AI for something like that. You can do that strictly with just automation.
And do you believe that we could set up something like real-time voting and not needing
Oh yeah,
Congress and
that's
Senate and stuff
super
like,
easy. Yeah.
and that would be safe? Like that would be,
Yeah.
there'd be ways that like checkers could be checking the checkers, and that there's
Yeah.
no way that could be. I don't know enough about computers, man. It's hard. I've done a lot of learning just to learn how to podcast.
Right on, right on. No, so that's kind of like one of the ideas behind Bitcoin is you have this decentralized system. And in order for any rule to actually change in that system, you have to have basically the interested parties agree on that rule change. And so the interested parties are going to be the Bitcoin community, people who are running Bitcoin nodes on their computer, and then you have the people who are doing the mining, who are, in it for the economic incentive more so than anything else. And then you also have the people who are the developers, who then they all kind of have a group vote on, how we move the technology forward. And so these people don't know each other. They could know each other, but even if they do know each other, you would still have to be able to possess at least 51% of the vote to kind of cheat the system, so to speak. And so that's kind of how like a Bitcoin handles the trust issue when you're talking about who benefits from these things, who gets paid from these things. And so we kind of have the models already built in working in the world at large. Like Bitcoin, for instance, is the only thing that I'm aware of from a technical perspective that hasn't been hacked. Now, people who utilize Bitcoin, people who do like exchanges and things like that, they have been hacked. But Bitcoin itself, as an actual program running for the past 12 years or maybe 11 years, something like that, has yet to be hacked, which is saying something in the computer world as well.
So your idea then is setting up a new system and almost like a new trading, a new coin or a new trading on in its own network, its own
Potentially.
system of people.
Potentially, yeah. I think it becomes a really effective tool if it's not a for-profit driven entity. Because then it just kind of streamlines things. And so imagine all of the cost of trust in the world today. You have the banks, you have the lawyers, you have the notaries, you have all of those buildings, all of the people who work for those companies. Now imagine,
Scumbags.
yeah. Now imagine if you can bottle all of that cost and now it's just the cost of, say, electricity. How
Right.
does that fundamentally change how we relate to that system from, not just an individual level, but from also like a communal level?
So then, okay, kind of that. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So you're kind of trying to look at like an ethically based, like-minded group of people on, and this is, we're going to break away, and this is going to be our coin type of thing, right?
Similar. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be a coin because that kind of puts some weird connotations on it these days,
Yeah,
but it's
trading
one of,
network or
right.
um,
It's one of those things where we're utilizing the very good aspects of the system to facilitate that kind of level of economy without having all of the drawbacks and the costs and the overhead that is traditionally in the environment. And then, the larger picture from there is, well, now you've created something that's a bit more efficient, even a lot more efficient in some instances. So you fast forward over the years, and the most efficient system usually always wins out in the marketplace.
yeah. I mean, that's the way capitalism works, right?
You're right. And then since you're plugging naturally into that capitalistic system, then you're competing in the marketplace of ideas, and there'll be goods and services that are sold externally to these things, of course. And then you have, the economy of things. But I think when you build it with very, very strong intent on the actual infrastructure and how that infrastructure really gets related to the world in terms of who has power, who has control, who gets paid from these things. I think if we're wise about that, we can actually, take this fractured system of society at scale and do something really nice with the next iteration.
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful dream. It's a beautiful idea. I dig it huge. Um, one of the only things I think is like kind of like, I've done deep dives and stuff through my life, always being inquisitive into like communism, and it's a great idea. Communism, everybody sharing and this and that is a terrific idea. But again, the two things, and I think you got one of them wiped out already, is corruption, right?
Mm-hmm.
Corruption is what takes over that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oligarchs and all bad people that were already in charge is still in charge of it and fucking over the
Right.
regular working class guy like you. But then a huge reason why communism has never worked and will never work is because it's meant to be a worldwide system. And if you got all these capitalist countries all around you, you know what I mean? It's not going to work when you only got a couple nation states doing it or one or two, when the rest of the world isn't doing it that way. So do you believe this model can exist on its own
Right. So that was
in with the rest of the world still going on like that? Do you think it can thrive?
right. That's what I was saying at the end, because what you're doing is essentially all these are going to be interfacing with the world at large in that big economic pool. But they're going to be more efficient systems.
Okay.
And they're going to be, they're going to be things that aren't going to have the litany of middlemen, because you don't have a lot of grubby fingers trying to extract value out of that. You have, back to what you were talking about, you have that meritocratic type system, and you just, you have nothing but great products, great effort, everything being turned out at such a high level that nobody can really compete against you from a lot of different perspectives. And so I think what happens is those good ideas, those more efficient ideas, will rise throughout the marketplace to just kind of dominate.
Okay. Well, what are you waiting for? How are we going to do this?
I, I've been doing this for a long time, brother. I've been trying to get it set up for forever. No,
How's
there's a
that
lot of
going?
pretty good. It started out as just kind of a harebrained idea when I was traveling. I was like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if people, could just, enjoy life and not have to deal with all the bullshit. And then from there, it took it was a good idea, but then it's like, well, what does that mean from like a garbage perspective? Right? Like, what does that mean from, obviously you're going to have people who are going to want to game the system. How can they game the system? What does that mean from economics? What does that mean from, an industrial perspective? And then, so it's been about 15 years of my life just kind of, you know, rehashing it, why, how to, fix the problems that we're clearly seeing happening now. And, how does that work inside of this model? And it's just been a long process, but things are getting there. People are definitely interested. And I think, uh, technology's to the right point where it's about to make sense.
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, your heart is in the right place. I can I can feel that. I can see that. Like it's globalism terrifies me in one sense because I'm a redneck. I like my simple country life, and I've seen global trade, um, North American Free Trade Agreement,
Oh
Trans-Pacific
yeah.
Partnership has
Oh yeah.
not done very good for the communities in British Columbia, man. It's devastated
Of
them.
course
Very,
not.
very
Yeah.
prosperous places. So that's the one in my mind. Like I want to believe I do believe it could work. We just got to get these lizard bastards out of
Yeah. I
control,
mean,
stranglehold over humanity. These families that have ruled over for all time. And I mean, that's not crazy. That's anybody that does any research can look at. It's the same bloodlines that have been in charge the whole time, and how they're not going to give up without a fight, man. And like,
well,
I
and so you know,
Information is the new war, right? That
right.
is the new bombs, that is the new guns, that is the new airplanes, is information. And I guess just waking people up is the only way.
Well, yeah, that's certainly part of it, man. And you know, it's one of those things where, um, yeah, in order to kind of get those changes moving and actually beat these people, the best way to do it, you're not going to go out and beat, you know, just like you said, information is the best, is the weapons of war these days, man. You're not going to go out and beat these people with guns and militaries and things like that, but you create better systems that beat them at their own game in their own marketplaces. And, you know, things change very dramatically. Like, you know, even a small example where you remember the apes who did like the AMC investing and were basically taking over AMC stock. It was quite a few years ago, a little bit before
Okay,
COVID.
I think I'm kind of, but it's kind of like a GameStop run on things.
Right. Yeah. Kind of similar to that. So that was essentially the first time the internet kind of banded together as just dudes who were getting their paycheck and, you know, actually competing against hedge funds in Wall Street. And Wall Street cheated and broke all the rules that they're not supposed to break to save these hedge funds and all of this stuff. But that's kind of what we're seeing. You know, that was a small scale aspect of what's going to balloon into what I feel is, you know, a very game changing kind of shift in the way that all of this is ran and how we perceive all of this thing that we call reality. And I think it's by getting rid of those, you know, those corrupt pillars that are doing nothing but, you know, draining out the beautiful resources of a land like you were describing.
Yeah, and I see that, like, so in the simplest of terms, just like the movie Ants or anything like that, or that all of our backs are holding up the monopoly board in which they're playing on. We hold all the power, so it's like, but you just look at how they try to suppress this. France is popping off right
Oh
now.
yeah,
Israel's
for sure.
popping off right now. But you're not going to find that on your local news, right?
No,
We hold all the power, but I mean, you hope they wouldn't do it. But at the end of the day, if we start organizing like something like that, they'll just pull the plug on the internet. But I mean, you can't think negatively. You can't be
at the same time, their whole
manifesting that.
goal, well, but at the same time, their whole goal is to make this completely centralized digital system. So
Right.
to
They
them to
can't
pull the
unplug it then.
to pull the plug on the internet means to pull the plug on all their planes as well, which is a fascinating kind of dichotomy, I guess.
Can we figure out the only way you need to sell this to people is like figure out some TikTok dance.
That's not me, brother. That's you.
And then we'll get
That's you.
everybody just to get them to pay attention for a second, right?
It's all you. By all
but
means,
that,
please do.
but that's what I mean, though. What I'm saying is the power of the internet. It's
Oh
these
yeah.
absolutely ridiculous things that
Mhm.
take over like a wave of fire and energy over the internet overnight.
Oh yeah.
Overnight from one little spot. By the time you wake up in the morning,
Yep.
there
Just
anybody
need
that
one of
has an
those
internet
viral
connection.
events. Yep.
So the proper idea could spark fire. You know what I mean? Like
For sure.
ember, a little ember in a hay barn, and that could be it.
Hey man, if you have a good idea, by all means, please feel free.
I think it'll be something really stupid like a TikTok dance.
Wouldn't surprise me. Yep.
Me and you and some Sasquatch looking men in some fucking mankinis
Oh
dancing to
boy.
Cardi B. That
Just
might
trying to
draw the
break the
attention of the
internet.
whole world.
Yeah, just trying to break the internet now.
All right, brother. Is there anything else you want to cover?
No, I'm sure we could probably just talk for hours, but yeah, I think that was a good fun first talk, man. It was good to
Yeah.
finally
You're a fascinating man. You got lots of things to talk about, man.
yeah, I would love to talk anytime you want to talk again, man.
Yeah, for sure. And can you tell the people the name of your book? There's no absolutes.
No absolutes, a framework for life. You can find it on my website, benjamincgeorge.com. That's where I kind of keep all my shenanigans located. And yeah, thanks again for having me, Brad. Always good to actually have a real conversation besides these text messages. So
Yeah, no, it was awesome, man. Stay on the line.
well,
All right, folks. This guy was a fascinating conversation. This guy blows my mind, a true intellectual. I love his ideas. I want to believe. I want to believe we can we got to believe that we could change the world. I think that's what I feel this wave is happening. Like all these waves of the Aurora Borealis behind us. There's a lot more to this universe. And I think everybody's starting to wake up and understand how it works. And I think that might be a lot of it, that we got to take responsibility. We got to take the reins from these lizard bastards. Maybe that was their whole part in the whole game, was to wake us up. You know, I've kind of thought that about COVID a lot. That it was, I thought it sucked at first, and I'm not getting the shot, and I'm not doing all that. I'm not complying, but now retrospectively looking on it, it woke so many people up. It made so many people start living more with their family and doing what matters more, and this and that. I mean, that, you know,
For sure.
that's the way she goes sometimes. That's what learning's all about. And
Indeed.
but we got to grab the reins. All right. Good night,
Well said.
YouTube land. Peace out, everybody.